Hello, my name is Lily. I want to share a story with you today. A story about you, me, and our hearts. Please listen carefully with all your heart. I promise it will touch your soul and make you feel something deep inside. Once upon a time in a small town, there lived a woman named Rose. She was simple, kind, and hard-working. Rose had 3 children, Emma, Mia, and Leo. She loved them more than anything in the world. Rose worked as a taxi driver. Every morning, before the sun even woke up, she would kiss her children softly on their foreheads and whisper, "I love you, stay happy." Then she would start her car and drive through the empty streets while the city was still asleep. The wind would softly brush against her face through the half-open window. Sometimes she would smile when she saw a little bird on a tree branch, singing its morning song. But on some days, she felt tired. The road seemed too long, the work too heavy, and her heart too weary. On those days, she would look at a small picture of her children stuck on the dashboard. It made her eyes shine with warmth again. I'm driving for you 3, my angels," she would whisper to herself. One rainy evening, after a long day, Rose picked up her last passenger, a young man named David. He was in his early 20s, with messy hair and tired eyes. He looked lost, as if he was carrying a heavy weight in his heart. "Good evening, ma'am," David said softly as he got in. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Good evening, young man." "Rough day?" Rose asked gently, trying to make him feel comfortable. David let out a tired sigh. "Yeah, you could say that. Just life." Rose didn't push him to talk. She knew that sometimes silence was the best comfort. She just smiled through the rearview mirror and kept driving. After a few minutes, David suddenly said, "Can I tell you something?" Rose glanced at him in the mirror, surprised. "Of course." He stared out of the window, his voice shaky. "I lost my mom 2 weeks ago. She used to call me every day. But now, the phone doesn't ring anymore. I don't know how to fill that silence. It feels too loud." Rose's hands slightly tightened on the steering wheel. She felt a soft sting in her chest. She didn't know David, but she could feel his pain as if it were her own. "I'm sorry for your loss, David," she said softly. "Moms are special. They are the heartbeats of our lives." David's eyes filled with tears, and he smiled sadly. "You know she loved roses. Our garden was full of them. But now they just bloom without her. It feels unfair." There was a pause. Rose didn't know how to take away his pain, but she could share it. She said, "My name is Rose, and I would be honored if you let me be a small part of your mom's memory. Maybe, for today, I can be the stranger who reminds you that she still blooms in your heart." David stared at her reflection in the mirror. His eyes were red, but for the first time that day, they held a softness. "Thank you, Rose. That means a lot." When they reached his destination, he took out his wallet, but Rose stopped him. "No, David. This one's on me. For your mom." His lips trembled slightly, and he nodded. "I'll plant a rose bush for her today." "Thank you. After he left, Rose sat quietly in her car for a moment. She stared at the empty seat where David had been. She thought about how we all carry pieces of our loved ones in our hearts, even when they are no longer with us. That night, she went home and hugged her children a little longer. She didn't say anything, just held them. They were confused but happy. The next morning, as she drove her taxi again, she saw something that made her heart stop. On the side of the road, there was a small rose bush, planted carefully in the soil. It stood alone but proud, its petals fresh with morning dew. Rose smiled and whispered, "Hello again, David. And hello to your mom." She felt something warm in her chest. It was a reminder that even strangers could share a piece of their hearts and leave kindness behind. Months passed, and Rose kept driving her taxi. She met all kinds of people, some cheerful, some broken, some quiet, and some lost. But she treated them all the same, with a gentle smile and a kind heart. One day, she picked up a woman named Clara. Clara was in her 50s, with kind eyes but tired shoulders. She wore a simple dress and clutched a small old teddy bear. As she got into the taxi, she softly said, "Please take me to the hospital." Rose nodded and started driving. After a while, Clara suddenly spoke. "My son is in the hospital. It's his birthday today. He's been in a coma for 2 years." Rose's eyes filled with tears instantly. She didn't know what to say, but her heart ached for Clara. "I'm so sorry. That must be very hard," Rose whispered. Clara smiled weakly. "It is. But today I brought him his teddy bear. It was his favorite. He used to call it Mr. Snuggles." Rose glanced at Clara through the mirror and saw how her hands trembled slightly as she held the bear. When they reached the hospital, Clara thanked Rose softly and walked inside. But Rose couldn't drive away. She sat in her taxi and stared at the hospital doors. She closed her eyes and prayed. She prayed that Clara's son would wake up. She prayed that love would find a way. A few months later, while waiting for her next ride, Rose heard a knock on her taxi window. She turned around and saw Clara, with tears streaming down her face and the brightest smile she had ever seen. "He woke up! My son woke up!" Clara cried. Without thinking, Rose jumped out of the car and hugged her tightly. Both women stood there, crying and laughing at the same time. He asked for Mr. Snuggles the moment he opened his eyes. Clara sobbed happily. Rose's heart swelled with joy. She realized that the world was filled with small magical moments. Moments when hope blooms, even in the darkest of times. She got back into her taxi with a new light in her eyes. She felt the world was a little softer, a little warmer, and a little kinder. And so, she kept driving, not just with her hands, but with her heart. She smiled at strangers. She prayed for the silent ones. She laughed with the joyful ones. And she gave a piece of herself to every soul who entered her car. Because sometimes, a little kindness from a stranger is all it takes to make someone believe in the beauty of life again. Thank you for listening to my story with your heart. If it touched you, if it made you feel something, please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. It helps me create more stories that can warm your soul and remind us all that love, kindness, and hope still bloom in this world. You said, Continue ChatGPT said, the seasons began to change, but my love for Grandma remained unchanged. The flowers she once admired bloomed and withered, the leaves turned golden and fell, and the winter snow blanketed the ground with a soft, quiet hush. Yet, through it all, I still felt her with me, in every whisper of the wind, in the warmth of the sun on my face, and in the delicate shimmer of the locket resting against my heart. One evening, I found myself sitting by the window again, watching the rain slide gently down the glass. I held a cup of tea in my hands, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. My mind wandered to memories of Grandma, her laughter, her gentle hands brushing my hair, the way she would hum softly when she cooked. I closed my eyes and slowly opened the locket. The tiny photograph of her and Grandpa stared back at me, their smiles forever frozen in time. I ran my finger over the image, tracing the outline of their faces, and for a moment, I could almost feel her hand in mine. I took a deep breath and let the tears fall, but they were no longer heavy tears of sorrow. They were soft and sweet tears, filled with gratitude for the love she had given me, for the memories she had left behind. As the days passed, I found myself drawn more and more to the places that reminded me of her. One afternoon, I returned to the park. The sky was a brilliant shade of blue, and the air smelled faintly of lilacs. I walked slowly along the path, trailing my fingers along the rough bark of the trees. When I reached the pond, I sat down on the same wooden bench where I had spoken to the elderly man. The bench was empty now, but I could still feel his presence. His words echoed softly in my mind. You just have to notice. I closed my eyes and let the sounds of the park wash over me. The gentle rustling of the leaves, the distant laughter of children, the soft quacking of the ducks. And then I felt it. The gentle warmth of the sun breaking through the clouds, resting on my face. It was so faint, so soft, but I knew it was her. I smiled softly, pressing my fingers to the locket. I miss you, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Just then, a little girl ran by, her curly brown hair bouncing as she chased a butterfly. Her laughter filled the air, light and carefree. She paused for a moment and glanced at me with wide, curious eyes. You look sad, she said, tilting her head. I smiled faintly. I'm not sad, I whispered, just remembering someone I love. The little girl's eyes sparkled with innocence. Without saying another word, she plucked a tiny purple flower from the grass and handed it to me. Her fingers were small and delicate, but the gesture was so pure, so filled with kindness, that it made my heart swell. Here, she said softly. My mommy says, flowers make people happy. I blinked back the tears that stung my eyes and took the flower from her hand. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling. She smiled brightly before running off again, her laughter filling the air like the soft chime of a bell. I sat there for a long time, holding the tiny flower in my hand. It was simple and delicate, but somehow it felt like a message from Grandma, a gentle reminder that love was still all around me, even in the smallest of moments. That night, I placed the tiny flower between the pages of Grandma's old book, the same book where she used to press wildflowers. I knew it would dry and fade over time, but I also knew that it would remain a part of me, just like her. As time passed, I slowly learned to carry her love with me, not as a weight, but as a light. I started sharing the stories she had once told me, the tales of her childhood, the lessons she had taught me, and the memories we had made together. One evening, I sat with my younger cousin by the fireplace. She was only 7, with big, curious eyes, and a heart full of wonder. She loved listening to stories, just like I once did. "Tell me a story," she pleaded, tugging at my sleeve. I smiled and gently pulled her onto my lap. "All right," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "I'll tell you about someone very special." And so, I told her about Grandma. I told her about the letters Grandpa used to write, about the music box that played their song, and about the swing in the backyard where we used to sit and watch the sunset. I told her about the love that never fades, about the memories that become part of us. When I finished, my cousin's eyes were wide with wonder. She looked up at me, her small hands resting in mine. "Will you tell me more about her tomorrow?" she asked softly. I smiled through the tears that threatened to spill. "Of course," I whispered. "I'll tell you as many stories as you want." And in that moment, I knew that as long as I kept sharing Grandma's stories, as long as I kept her memory alive, she would never truly be gone. She would live on in every word, in every smile, in every tear. Months passed, and then years. Life carried on as it always does. I grew older, but I carried her love with me every step of the way. On the day of my college graduation, I wore her locket around my neck. As I walked onto the stage to receive my diploma, I pressed my fingers against it. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding with nerves. But then, I felt it, the familiar warmth of the silver against my skin, and I knew she was with me. I closed my eyes for a brief moment and whispered, "I did it, Grandma." And when I opened my eyes, I could almost see her smiling at me, her eyes filled with pride. As I stood there in my cap and gown, holding my diploma, I looked up at the bright blue sky and smiled, because I knew she was watching. She was there in the sunlight on my face, in the gentle wind that brushed against my cheek, in the memories that filled my heart, and she always would be. If you're still with me, thank you for walking through this story with me. If it touched your heart, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps me share more heartfelt and meaningful stories with you. And remember, love never truly leaves us. It simply becomes part of who we are, living on in the smallest of moments, in the simplest of gestures, and in the hearts that remember